Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimberry, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. As my listeners know, we spend a lot of time talking about ELA and math for obvious reasons. Those tend to be the subject areas that are tested most thoroughly across not just the United States, but globally, where our listeners are coming from. But those aren't the only subjects we need to be worried about. We also need to be talking about visual performing arts, the humanities, social studies, and science. I'm excited that tonight we're going to be spending some time talking about social studies. As my listeners know, we've had on the New York Historical talking about how to use objects in learning, how to really mix up the modalities in terms of the way we teach social studies. Today, we're going to talk about the academic complexity of teaching social studies. While there is a benefit to learning facts and dates, especially in social studies, particularly in this challenging time where facts are not necessarily taken as facts, there is a purpose to that, even just to get continuity in terms of timing. But if we leave social studies just there, it's a loss, because social studies is really the story of humanity and how we as humans have created problems, solved problems, developed, advanced, how we adapted. And that story is ongoing, and it'll continue to grow as long as there are human beings. So how do we move beyond just those facts and statistics when it comes to social studies? How do we develop a particularly rich culture of inquiry, particularly on the elementary school level? Because students are capable, K-6, of thinking deeply about topics in social studies. So for this reason, I'm really excited to be joined by a colleague, Dr. Charisse Smith. Dr. Smith is the CEO and founder of Sankofa Educational Consulting. She is also the former curriculum supervisor of social studies, K-6, in the Trenton, New Jersey school system. And we're going to talk about the work she has done in implementing an inquiry design model in Trenton Public Schools. Charisse, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, John, for inviting me.
I love to have you. I like talking to anyone, as you could tell, Charisse, but I really like bringing on people that I know personally onto the show. We're going to really do a lot of that tonight.
Okay, all right.
So, Charisse, before we really even get into anything,
Mhm.
one thing that us educators do is we drop a lot of jargon. So what is IDM, or an inquiry design model, when it comes to K-6 social studies?
So we're looking at basically problem-based learning or project-based learning using social studies and history. There's questions that you have, and there are problems that needed to be solved. So how did people solve these problems that they had? What do we do now with this knowledge? What does it have to do with me? Asking kids, why do I have to learn about this? And the third thing is, in elementary, kids love stories. You can tell a story orally or with a picture book or acting it out. Kids love a good story. So that's how the inquiry design model really supports great age-appropriate learning, looking at stories and how students can think critically about some complex issues, but are able to do some activities that they would normally in an ELA class, listen to a story, answer some questions, draw a picture, explain your picture. And now, what are you going to do with that picture? Who would benefit? How would this make our classroom a better place? How would it make our school a better place? And even how would it make our world a better place? And sometimes these kids will go way beyond our expectations. So I would say that in a nutshell, it's project based learning, problem based learning, but using social studies and history.
And I love that you say that because it's not them just studying something that happened, as you were alluding to, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, even 10 years ago. And what does it have to do with them? It's about
Mhm.
using that knowledge to create new knowledge. And like you said, to make their classrooms a better place. And the skills that they're using in creating those pictures, for example, are skills that they can carry forth in many aspects of life. So again, it makes that learning come alive, particularly in social studies.
It covers quite a bit. It covers speaking and listening skills as well, because there is critical discourse among young students. And this is something adults are having a very hard time doing right now. So we really have to focus on how do you have a good argument without not talking to you after school or saying something mean on social media,
Mm,
but to have this safe space that you can discuss things that you may not agree on.
indeed. Why did you think, Charisse, that now was the time to bring IDM into Trenton Public Schools?
For one, logically, the state is moving in the direction of inquiry. I was working with the coordinator for social studies with an inquiry. Actually, we're working on one together. Hopefully, we can get back to it in December. If you look at the disciplinary practices in New Jersey for the state standards, it's all surrounded by inquiry. It seems as though social studies is always put on the back burner, but it's the fun subject to teach and to do. I think that now, with students not having a safe space to talk about different things that happen every day, like getting along, having rules in the classroom, not just posting them, but why do we have them? Is, I think, really important now for students. I think coming back from the pandemic, just having a conversation or disagreeing with one another has become a big issue and continues to be. But also having the joy of coming back to school and learning as well.
Yeah, and also just that the whole concept around student voice. You were mentioning helping students to have the discussions that us adults are struggling with right now. Having that voice and sharing that voice in an appropriate way and helping our students to develop those skills,
Mhm,
particularly, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, when we're talking about hard questions, which
mhm,
obviously come up in social studies and history all the time.
mhm.
And I know some sectors of our society would like to just not have those questions discussed. It's not going away. Those questions in history is what formed us as a nation. So we'll talk about that, Charisse. But you're right. Whether it's Trenton students or students in Montclair, New Jersey, or anywhere, having again the ability to develop those life skills is not only going to make social studies fun and interesting, but those are skills that they can carry with them as citizens who are going to be voting. At the time when we're recording this, it's election season.
Mhm.
So that's important. And you sold me on the why. My question then is what are the challenges when it comes to teachers who might be more used to teaching traditionally from the textbook, teachers that see themselves more as the sage on the stage, the font of knowledge? When you brought this model in, I'm sure there were several teachers who were
Mhm,
scared to death.
mhm,
So, what were some of those
mhm.
limitations and mindset that teachers had when using IDM in their social studies programming? And how did you get them on board?
So one, it was spending the time on social studies. Many times social studies was at the end of the day and then the buses are called and students are leaving early. So they didn't have enough time. And they were thinking, oh, this is something extra we have to do. So one was logistics. Now I really have to pay attention to what I'm teaching in social studies. Elementary teachers have to teach everything. So some teachers may be the math guru or the science guru or the ELA guru, but not too many people in the elementary realm are like, yes, I'm going to spend all this time on social studies and this is wonderful. But having teachers understand that you can pull in all of those disciplines into your social studies space as well. So getting teachers to understand that it is okay to spend that extra time. It is okay to go down that rabbit hole because now you have sparked something in students. It's okay that you don't know everything. Part of the fun for IDM, in IDM, even for the teachers, is gaining that knowledge. I had a teacher who caught the IDM bug and started writing inquiries. And one teacher was doing a inquiry on the transatlantic slave trade and the economy between New York and New Jersey. She did some research and realized that these ships were coming from Barbados. She realized, oh, I'm Barbadian. It got to a point where she said, Dr. Smith, I have to apologize. I haven't finished the inquiry because I spent so much time digging deep into this. It was sugar and iron, and I didn't know that either. So we were both geeking out. It gives a chance for teachers to geek out and find what was relevant for them and sparked interest for them. That's what I'm trying to get teachers to understand. We need to make history and social studies more relevant to their lives. Once you find what is relevant to them, you have them right there. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you totally answered my question. In fact,
Okay.
would you say that topic around the transatlantic slave trade was a topic that galvanized students? Because again, that can be a challenging topic. Did it bring the students together with their teacher? Did it help students to feel vested in their learning?
That
About
particular
that.
inquiry did not, I had to finish it because she was just inundated. So I finished that inquiry. I haven't used it yet, but one inquiry that we used was who benefits from colonialism? We talked about how was it the indentured servant? Was it the enslaved Africans? Was it the indigenous people who were here? The students, once they were able to pull all of this information together, something clicked in them to say, oh my gosh, this wasn't fair for anybody. And they wanted to learn more. One teacher said her students actually started to be really upset. Oh my gosh, this really happened to people. This shouldn't be. She told me we had to put everything else aside because the kids wanted to continue the conversation. And these were kids who didn't even know what a beaver was. Teachers were having difficulty saying, our kids don't know this. They have no idea. They don't have content knowledge. Tell them, give them something. That one teacher brought in a beaver set of gloves that she had. And that just fascinated the kids even more. And they dove even deeper. So even with that complex relationship between colonialism and being fair and things being unjust, still resonates with a fourth grader. They know what it is when they're being treated unfairly. And that was the relevant piece that made them connect to something that happened hundreds of years ago.
And I could just tell how excited they must have been because I could hear the excitement in your voice. So that sounds also like that took a lot of strategic thinking around how to build that unit. What work did you do with teachers to help them craft those inquiry units? What does a typical IDM unit look like? What were the supports you generally gave teachers so they could create these units and use them with their students?
It first started with the standards. I don't want to say the excuse, but this is what was needed to help teachers who had parents who did not agree with the content. This unit is covering the standards. So they felt comfortable. I actually asked teachers what was their favorite topic or content angle. That's how we start with an inquiry. So if it's geography and economics, if it is culture. So let's take a look at the standards, those content lenses, and let's start with some compelling questions. What kind of question could you ask that doesn't have the answer of yes or no, gets under your skin, makes you say, wait, what? Or I can't believe she asked me that question. Making kids really pause and think helped teachers get the ball rolling, and then pulling in tasks related to what they're working in ELA. So it's compare and contrast, or inferring information from a primary text. When I had a curriculum writer who said, there's no primary resources for young children. I was like, let's take a look at photographs. Photographs of families during the Dust Bowl. Can some children relate to this? Absolutely. And some not so much. But you have to know your students. You have to know what's relevant to their lives. So that's another way. Many of the teachers had difficulty with. They had so much fun on the meat of it. My love is the informed action. What do you do with this information now that you have it? Where does it go? Does it just sit in your notebook? Or how can you use this to make someone's life better, to make the classrooms better, everybody in the classroom, or your school, or your state? It leads to a vast amount of opportunities where kids can be civically engaged. That's my favorite piece.
I love that you said that. In fact, Charisse, you more or less answered my next question, which was, given so many competing standards and learning goals, particularly when as a society, we do focus largely on ELA and mathematics. You just talked about how you can integrate ELA and literacy into these inquiry units. Since you more or less answered that question, I'm going to give you an alternative question,
Uh-oh.
which is based on what you were just saying. You were saying that your favorite piece of IDM is informed action. What were some of the exciting examples of informed action you saw elementary school students do and create?
One was a second grade classroom. And this teacher was gun ho. She called me in all of the time to say, am I doing it the right way? I said, you're doing fine. So their inquiry had to do with environmentalism. How do people create their environment? They live in the inner city and had a park next to them. The teacher asked them, how do we make our community better? What's important to you? The kids were very real. They said, because it's daylight savings time, the park gets darker earlier. So we can't go to the park because there are no lights and there's garbage in the park. So they learned about which buildings were commercial buildings, which were residential second grade. Second grade. And who do you contact in order to get things done in your community? They did a wonderful job by reaching out to the powers that be at City Hall to voice their concerns. And it was so authentic. The kids felt like they had a voice and that somebody listened. They often said, we didn't know that we could do this. We didn't know that we could ask for something as second graders, which was amazing. And what she also did, one thing I do like about IDM is that it's adjustable to meet the needs of your learners and their needs and your teaching style as well. What she did, she pulled in the parents in this IDM and she surveyed the parents to see what their concerns were about the park. Then she created a graph of what the students said and what the parents said. I was like, that is just amazing.
And there's your
Many
math connection too, by the way.
Absolutely. She said, I couldn't believe how much I was able to get in. So I found that when we're writing the inquiries, we are collecting a lot of standards. We're hitting so many standards with maybe 14 days of work dedicated to, if you're teaching social studies, the amount of time that's listed in your schedule. But I know how elementary days are with fire drills and trips and things. I get it, but you can fit it in. Once your kids find that spark, you make time.
Indeed. In fact, AI has a lot of problems associated with it, but now you could ask AI, hey, I'm doing this in ELA, I'm doing this in math, and I want to create an inquiry design model in social studies around this. How
Hmm.
can I bring in the ELA? How can I bring in the math? How can I bring in the science?
Absolutely.
So that's cutting down on even the amount of research teachers have to
Mhm.
create a
Mhm.
really exciting inquiry.
And especially with the younger grades, older kids still like someone reading to them, is having a mentor text where you are reading a segment and doing a read aloud on just a segment, or using that same read aloud that you have. Sometimes ELA and social studies, they marry at certain points of the pacing. And it's okay to pull that ELA book. If it's making sense and there's a link, because you want kids to say, oh, yeah, I remember we read that in ELA. Go get that book and bring it over here.
That's
I,
why you're here, Cherie.
I do have another wonderful story of a fourth grade class. They were talking about the same inquiry that had to do with colonialism, however, and being treated fairly. And the teacher asked, it was a part of her launching this lesson, the inquiry on what is injustice? What is something that's unfair? And the fourth grade class said, not everybody has health care. So the teacher tried to explain, okay, here's the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And they were like, what's that? So they dove deep, John, deep. I have chills whenever I talk about it. Their informed action was to create a public service announcement on what the Affordable Care Act is. John, I can't do that. Fourth graders did that. And so they shared it with the school. And then I pushed them even further. Where else can this public service announcement go? You think it could be shown on a screen in a waiting room at the clinic or in your doctor's office? You mean we could do that? Absolutely. So not only are we giving kids permission to go deep where it starts to resonate and they start to make connections, but also as an administrator, giving teachers permission to run with it. They were like, are you sure? I'm like, go. Those teachers, though, their students absolutely had a ball. Just wonderful.
And talk about the relevance to the community at large, educating their parents, their elders. Talk
Mhm.
about a community vested
Mhm.
in knowledge. I wasn't even involved in that, and I'm getting chills, Charisse. So, now, playing devil's advocate a little bit, I'm sure there might be a teacher out there going, Charisse, John, this sounds wonderful, but
Mhm.
this also sounds so time consuming. When it comes to that pacing that you mentioned, how many inquiry design models maybe should a teacher do in a given year? Or should this be their entire social studies curriculum? And then to your point, do we give teachers some grace not to cover some other things if they're doing this inquiry? How do you help educators and administrators scale out IDM?
Part of it was, what are you spending your time doing with your kids? So, for example, when all the major holidays come around, Hispanic Heritage Month, Black History Month, like social studies stops. Why not integrate it throughout? So the first marking period of many schools, of all of our schools, especially in Trenton, Hispanic Heritage Month was it was screaming the theme of Hispanic Heritage Month, but they were not paying attention to the standards that needed to be addressed in that marking period. Telling teachers, okay, incorporate, let's create an inquiry together. It has to be, the teachers have to have ownership of this. And it's not just one person, it needs to be a team of people. just trusting the process. I wrote a blog for the C3 teachers, and my last statement was for anyone who is thinking about using IDM. It's tough, but lean in, go in because the results are amazing.
And I will link, Charisse, in the show notes that blog post you did on C3 because I know it will help other educators out there looking to
Mhm,
implement this. It has your contact info so they could reach
mhm,
out to you.
mhm,
So now you've left Trenton, you're a consultant, you have your own firm doing this kind of work. How do you help different school systems to address, particularly in social studies, those hard questions? You already mentioned
mhm,
colonialism. You said that one thing you do is grounded in the standards when parents push back on some of the
mhm,
content. I think you've already partially answered
mhm,
this question. How do you advise schools
mhm,
to deal with those hard questions that in social studies are
mhm.
going to come up?
This way of teaching removes you from any bias because you are presenting diverse perspectives. You have this perspective here, that perspective here, and one in the middle. And then you let go. That's one thing teachers have a hard time doing is just letting go. Let the kids struggle a little bit, not to where they're fighting in the classroom, but a gradual release of responsibility of the tasks they have to do and the content. So just say if you had an inquiry about the pipelines going through the middle of America and how the indigenous folks feel, how the oil company feels, and how the local residents feel, and say, is the pipeline worth leave your biases and your opinions at the door. You're asking tons of questions. You ask a student, why do you think that? Prove it to me. Make a claim. Inquiry asks students to make a claim. We talk about having that discourse after. Someone may not agree, but it's not you providing your side of the story. Your students should not know which side of the aisle you stand in. You're giving all of the information. And that happens to be one of the social studies disciplinary practices, diverse perspectives. That's what you have to do. It shouldn't just be one. That safe space of the standards, having the kid, you are facilitating their learning. I'm providing you a primary document. I'm asking you to analyze it. What do you think? Where do you think it came from? They might have a bias towards X, Y, and Z. So you're asking more questions than you are providing information. Let the students do the work. I often say to some students that I am a lazy teacher. You do it. You find out, then come back to me and we can
For
talk
the
about it.
record, she is not lazy at all.
Get a good laugh out of it. It's making the kids do the work. When we have teachers that say, "Oh my gosh, this is a lot of work," you are just setting the stage. And that's actually an element of IDM. You propose this compelling question and then you set the stage for those discussions. So those other questions pop up. You may have a list of questions already prepared, but guaranteed after that compelling question, your kids are going to have more questions. Then you're going to say, I need more time to do this. The kids will start asking you, when are we going to do social studies? To answer your question, to come back around, is to remain in the space of standards, removing your own bias, you're providing information, and the kids are social scientists. We're leading them to become social scientists. They're doing the research on their own. If you can back up your claim, I'm good. Um,
Charisse, you must have my playbook because you're foreshadowing all the questions that I want to ask. And you've already highlighted that one challenge could be the teacher bringing in their bias. Another challenge could be teachers not knowing when to let go. In theory, who could argue with IDM? This is
mhm,
beautiful.
mhm.
But where it does go wrong, when it goes wrong, where does it go wrong?
When you don't even try. When teachers say, we're going to go through this inquiry together, that teacher may not have that content knowledge, a student may say something that you didn't even think of. And for kids to hear you say, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't think of it that way. Kids love that kind of dialogue. One thing kids do is to argue. Cultivate that into a positive space. So again, you're taking care of SEL as well in IDM. Do you respectfully have a disagreement?
I'm glad you said that. One thing I really liked that I saw in Trenton was the teacher was showing a sixth grade teacher was showing students a painting of Indigenous Americans. And I suggested to the teacher, why don't you divide the picture into four and
Mhm,
then have students take each section of the picture
mhm.
and tell you what they see. And the students came up with some amazing
Amazing.
insights.
Mm.
And the teacher said, I didn't even think of that myself. It made the kids feel proud. They felt seen, they felt heard, they felt validated, which gets right to your point about the SEL connection as well.
Another, I don't want to say roadblock or bump in the road that I got from teachers. These kids don't know any of this. They don't know anything. And that is so far from the truth. Even with your picture, splitting your picture up into quadrants, you said, what do you see? What do you not see? And then
Exactly.
kids lean in. That you want kids to lean in. So I'm asking teachers to lean in, and your kids will lean in when you do as
Now,
well.
you highlighted something that is another elephant in the room, and it does deal with teacher bias in a way where it's not just a teacher's own political bias, but the bias around what they feel their kids can and cannot do. So, how do you handle when a teacher says, my kids can't do that? My kids are going to struggle in doing that. But for the benefit of our listeners,
I think one thing as an administrator, I wish I could have cloned myself because I wanted to do more of that team teaching with the teachers who say that kids can't do. Yeah, they can. It's a matter of how you present it and your expectations. Yeah, you can do this and you're going to do it. And even if it's in small bites, yeah, case in point, I had another second grade teacher during our professional development. She came to me and said, Dr. Smith, I was having problems with the inquiry because you asked for students to look at a population density map. We're just learning about the compass rose. Then she said, but I had faith and I went along with it. So I put the population density map up and explained it to the students, and they understood what it meant. Then she showed a population density map of New Jersey versus Utah and sat back. The kid says, even though Utah's a large state, it doesn't mean there's a lot of people there. Knowing nothing about Utah. And then New Jersey has all of these people, and it's such a tiny state. So, yet your kids did know what a population density map and how to use it. Second grade.
yeah, we just have to let them fly. A lot of times when we hear my kids can't do that, that's more about our limitations or what
Mhm.
we feel limited about in our own teaching capabilities than the students. I even will also say if your students are going to struggle to get into it, how can you maybe give them a starting guiding question?
Mhm.
Or how do you tell them what the expectations are? That
Mhm.
gets to success criteria. How will you know you've done what you needed to do by the end of this 45 minutes?
Sentence stems are wonderful, especially for those kids who are afraid to speak in public or just don't know where to start. Now they see it, they are able to have some point of reference. Now they are participating.
Charisse, we've talked about a lot of things in a very short amount of time when it
Mhm.
comes to IDM and
Mhm.
inquiry. What have we not talked about that you want listeners to know?
Oh, that IDM is fun to do. IDM is good for the common good of us all. This IDM process helps teachers and students. It's not just giving you a textbook and says, okay, you're going to cover chapters 1 through 5 in the first marking period. What do you want kids to do with that knowledge? After going through those 5 chapters, and you ask a student, what did you learn? I don't know. But if you say, what argument did you have and how did you use that argument to help out Parker School? They're going to come up with it. It's starting to become embedded in their daily living as well. So again, lean in. It takes some time. We started with a student who had a problem or a question. There were 2 schools next to each other, and they did not have a playground. So she wanted to know why they didn't have a playground and how could we get one. And she had to explain to us, why is a playground important? So we had to keep asking that question over, and students were like, it makes you feel better when you get outside running around, having more fun, and you forget about your problems. We turned that into an inquiry. And we were able to bring in civil engineers and members of the district who were responsible for grounds and buildings, and they were able to create their own design. So we pulled in math, public speaking, art, and the kids had fun. I still have kids who come up to me and say, remember when we did that park thing? But they probably won't remember the year that such and such happened. So what is more important? Making IDM relevant will make your life easier.
I love that. There's no better example to your point about IDM benefiting us all than the example you just gave. So now, Charisse, before we go, what are you working on now? What are you doing in your consulting business? And where can people find out more information about you if they want to reach out?
I am working on a series of newsletters. The 250th anniversary of America and the Declaration of Independence is next year. I am in the hub of the Revolutionary War period, and I'm doing some research about special places here in my own backyard. Now I'm able to go and visit these places, interview people, ask some compelling questions, and through those newsletters, posts, really sparking interest. I'm working with a Catholic school now to implement IDM in a Spanish class. Inquiries that are relevant to this area and then some other areas. In the next couple of months, I will be traveling to Brazil. There is a section of Brazil, the state is called Bahia, which has the largest number of Africans in the diaspora in this one place, in the entire world. They have more Africans who have left Africa in this state in Brazil than are in America. I am dying to embrace that culture and do some research there. I had no clue that this group of my people are living there. It's just amazing how much we all have in common.
And I think you could spend years. I don't know if I'm ever going to hear from you again because Brazil has so many different people that went to Brazil. You could be doing inquiry design for the next 50 years, Charisse, in Brazil.
Wonderful. It will be wonderful. And then other things I'm doing is speaking engagements, seeking out folks who need some help with teaching complex history, helping them feel comfortable in taking that first step. You don't have to do an inquiry every marking period. You can do one a year and start that way.
I love that you said that. So tell us where people who want to contract with you can find you.
They can visit my website at sankofaconsulting.com. You can reach me also. My email is Dr. Charisse at sankofa-consulting.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I post quite a bit on LinkedIn.
Yeah, Charisse, this has been a lot of fun, an important topic. I'm really glad that you came on to talk about how to take it in pieces, not to be frightened, about addressing complex topics, really putting students in the driver's seat, engaging them and driving their voice, and really talking about the long-term benefits of doing this and having an inquiry model focus in our social studies. So especially our elementary social studies.
Absolutely.
So Charisse, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, John, for having me. And reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out.
I'm going to put all of your links into the show notes. And I
Okay.
hope on that blog or on your website, you're going to be posting pictures and information about your trip to Brazil because I'm excited for you.
Most definitely. We're so excited.
You should be. I'm envious. I'll have to have you come on after
Yeah.
to talk about what
Yeah.
you discovered in terms of your inquiry in Brazil.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you, Charisse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.